The stagecoach rattled into Jerome, Arizona territory, on a scorching afternoon in June of 1882, carrying Martha Vance and everything she owned in 2 worn carpetbags, along with a gut feeling that this position would either save her or break her completely. She pressed her face against the dusty window, studying the copper mining town that clung precariously to Cleopatra Hill. The buildings seemed to defy gravity, stacked upon each other at impossible angles. Smoke rose from the smelters, and the constant sound of mining operations echoed through the mountain air. Jerome was rough, wild, and nothing like the orderly Boston neighborhood where she had grown up before her family's fortunes collapsed. Martha was 24 years old, unmarried and desperate enough to respond to a cryptic advertisement seeking someone to bring order to a homestead outside of town. The pay was generous, the term was 6 months, and the advertisement had been remarkably light on details. Her references from her previous position as a household manager for a wealthy family in Prescott had apparently been sufficient. The family had let her go not because of incompetence, but because they were relocating to San Francisco and could not afford to bring their entire staff. She had exactly $17 to her name and no prospects beyond this position. The stagecoach driver helped her down, and Martha stood in the dusty street, shielding her eyes against the harsh sunlight. A man approached, tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that needed cutting. He wore dusty work clothes and boots that had seen better days, and he moved with the easy confidence of someone who had spent his entire life outdoors. "Miss Vance." His voice was deep with a hint of uncertainty that surprised her. "Yes, Mr. Garrett Nichols. That would be me." He reached for her bags, and she noticed his hands were calloused and scarred from hard work. "My wagon is just over here. The homestead is about 45 minutes outside of town." Martha followed him to a weather-beaten wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. The wagon bed contained supplies, sacks of grain, and various tools in no particular order. She climbed up onto the seat, arranging her skirts, and Garrett settled beside her, taking up the reins. They rode in silence for the first 10 minutes, leaving Jerome behind as they descended into the Verde Valley. The landscape was breathtaking in its harsh beauty. Red rocks jutted up from the earth like ancient monuments, and the vegetation was sparse but determined. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the brilliant blue sky. "I should probably tell you what you are getting into," Garrett finally said, not looking at her. "The advertisement might have understated the situation. I assumed as much when it offered such generous compensation. My wife died 2 years ago. Fever took her quick. Since then, I have been trying to manage the ranch on my own along with raising my son. I am not doing well at either." His jaw tightened, and Martha saw the admission cost him something. "How old is your son?" "Tommy just turned 6 last month." "Good kid. Wild as a March hare, but good." "And the homestead?" Garrett was quiet for a long moment. "You will see soon enough." When they crested the final hill and the homestead came into view, Martha understood his reluctance to describe it. The main house was a sprawling structure that looked like it had been built in stages, without much planning between additions. One section was adobe, another was timber, and a third appeared to be a combination of both. The roof sagged in places. Outbuildings dotted the property in no discernible pattern, some with doors hanging off hinges. Fences needed mending. Laundry flapped from a line strung between 2 posts, though from the look of the stained and rumpled garments, they needed washing rather than drying. A small boy burst from the house, running barefoot through the dust. His clothes were too small, his hair was a tangled mess, and his face was smudged with dirt. But his smile was brilliant. "Pa, you are back. Did you bring the peppermints?" Garrett's entire demeanor softened as he climbed down from the wagon. "I did. They are in the supplies, but first, come meet Miss Vance. She's going to be staying with us for a while, helping get things organized." Tommy skidded to a stop, eyeing Martha with open curiosity. "Are you going to be like a ma?" The question hung in the air, awkward and painful. Garrett opened his mouth, but Martha spoke first, her voice gentle. "I am here to help your father with the household and the organization of your home. I expect we will be seeing quite a bit of each other." "Can you cook?" "Pa tries, but everything tastes like boot leather." "Tommy," Garrett said sharply, though Martha caught the hint of embarrassment in his expression. "It is a fair question," Martha said, climbing down from the wagon without waiting for assistance. "Yes, I can cook. Among other things. Now, why do you not show me inside and you can tell me what you would most like to have for supper?" Tommy grabbed her hand with complete trust, chattering as he pulled her toward the house. "I like biscuits and beans. And sometimes Pa makes this thing with bacon, but it is always burned on the bottom. And we had eggs yesterday, but one of the chickens got out and we could not find her for 3 days and—" Martha stepped through the door and stopped, her professional composure faltering for just a moment. The interior was worse than the exterior had suggested. Dishes were piled in a dry sink, some with food crusted on them that looked days old. Clothes were strewn across furniture. Papers, tools, bits of leather tack, and various unidentifiable objects covered every surface. The floor needed sweeping and probably scrubbing. Cobwebs decorated the corners. A pot on the stove contained something that might have once been stew, but now looked like a science experiment. Garrett had followed them inside, and she heard him clear his throat. "Like I said, I have not been managing well." Martha set down her bags and slowly turned in a circle, taking it all in. She had organized households before, had taken chaotic situations and brought them to order. But she had never seen anything quite like this. This was not just a messy house. This was the physical manifestation of grief, of a man drowning and unable to keep his head above water. She looked at Garrett, really looked at him, and saw the exhaustion in every line of his face. He was probably around 30, she guessed, but he looked older. His eyes were a striking hazel green, but they held a weariness that went bone deep. "Well," she said briskly, rolling up her sleeves, "I suppose we should start somewhere. Tommy, do you know where clean linens are kept?" "I think maybe in the chest in Pa's room. Or maybe the other room. We kind of just use what is out." "All right. First things first, Mr. Nichols, I will need you to bring in my bags and show me where I will be staying. Then I suggest you tend to your animals and whatever other outdoor work needs doing. Tommy and I will handle inside for now. Tomorrow we can discuss a proper plan, but tonight we are going to have a decent supper and clean sheets to sleep on." Garrett looked at her with something between relief and amazement. "Yes, madam." Martha spent the rest of the afternoon working alongside Tommy, who proved to be an enthusiastic if occasionally distracted helper. She discovered that beneath the chaos were the bones of a good home. The furniture was well made, the house was structurally sound despite its appearance, and someone, probably Garrett's late wife, had once cared deeply about making this a warm place to live. She sorted the dishes into categories, filled the sink with water heated on the stove, and set Tommy to carefully washing while she dried and put things away in the cabinets. She found foodstuffs in various locations, consolidated them, and took inventory. She located the linens, selected the least worn, and set them to soak in a large tub outside with soap and hot water. As the sun began to set, Martha had managed to clear the kitchen enough to work in it. She found flour that was still good, lard, salt, and buttermilk in the spring house. She made biscuits, fried salt pork, and prepared a pan of beans with molasses and mustard. It was simple food, but it was hot and edible and served on clean plates. Garrett came in as she was setting the table, and he stopped in the doorway, staring. The kitchen, while far from perfect, was recognizable as a functional space. The dishes were clean and put away. The surfaces were clear. The floor had been swept, and the smell coming from the stove was actually appetizing. "Tommy, go wash your hands and face at the pump," Martha instructed. "Use soap." The boy scampered off, and Garrett remained frozen. I did not think anyone could make a dent in that in one afternoon. It is far from finished, but we can eat without risking illness now, which I consider progress. She studied him, noting the way he stood stiffly, as if unsure whether he was allowed in his own kitchen. "You should wash up as well. Supper will be ready in 5 minutes." They sat around the table, the three of them, and Martha watched as Tommy tore into his food with the appetite of a growing boy. Garrett ate more slowly, but she noticed he cleaned his plate entirely. Neither of them spoke much during the meal, and Martha felt the strangeness of the situation settling around them. She was in this man's home, an outsider brought in to fix what had broken when his wife died. After supper, she heated more water and washed dishes while Garrett took Tommy outside to check on the animals one more time before bed. When they returned, Tommy was drooping, clearly exhausted from the day's excitement and activity. "Let me see to him," Martha said. "Where does he sleep?" "The small room off the main bedroom. I will show you." She followed Garrett through the house, noting the layout. The main bedroom was large but cluttered, clearly Garrett's space now, though feminine touches remained. A pretty quilt on the bed, a painted wardrobe, a mirror with an ornate frame. The smaller room adjoining it held a narrow bed and a few scattered toys. Martha helped Tommy change into a nightshirt that was relatively clean, though it too was getting small. She tucked him into bed and was surprised when he reached up and hugged her spontaneously. "I am glad you are here," he mumbled, already half asleep. "It has been real lonely." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She smoothed his hair back and spoke softly. "Try to sleep now. Tomorrow we have more work to do." She emerged from the room to find Garrett standing in the hallway, holding a lantern. In the soft light, he looked vulnerable in a way he had not before. "Your room is this way," he said quietly, leading her to a small space that had clearly been used for storage. He had moved out some of the excess, and her bags sat on the narrow bed. "It is not much. It will be fine. I have stayed in worse." She paused, then decided to address the obvious. "Mr. Nichols, I want to be clear about expectations. You hired me to organize your home, and I intend to do that. But I am not here to replace your wife or to be a mother to your son. I will be kind to him, and I will do my job well, but there are boundaries that need to be respected." Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. "I understand. I did not hire you expecting anything other than what was in the advertisement. I need help. I have needed it for a long time, but I was too proud to admit it." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "The truth is, Miss Vance, I am drowning. The ranch work alone is more than I can handle, and adding the household and Tommy. I am failing him. I am failing at everything. So I am grateful you are here, and I will respect whatever boundaries you set." The honesty in his voice surprised her. In her experience, men rarely admitted to struggling, especially not to a woman they had just met. "Then we will work well together," she said. "I will need to discuss a schedule with you tomorrow. There is much to be done, and it will go better if we coordinate. Whatever you need." After Garrett left her to settle in, Martha sat on the edge of the narrow bed and let herself feel the weight of what she had taken on. This was not just about organizing a cluttered house. This was about a broken family, a grieving man, a lonely child, and a home that had forgotten how to function. She thought about her own losses, the genteel poverty that had forced her into service, the long hours and endless work that had been her life for years. She had learned to not expect much from her positions. Do the work, collect the pay, move on. Keep her heart carefully locked away where it could not be hurt. But as she lay down to sleep that first night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the homestead settling around her, Martha felt something she had not felt in a very long time, a sense of purpose that went beyond simple survival. The next morning began before dawn. Martha woke to the sound of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. She dressed quickly in a simple work dress and apron, pinned up her dark blonde hair, and emerged from her room to find the house quiet. Through the window, she could see Garrett already outside, heading toward the barn. She stoked the fire in the stove, filled the coffee pot with water and grounds, and began taking proper inventory of the kitchen. By the time the sun was fully up, she had a comprehensive list of what was needed. Basic staples, proper cleaning supplies, some repairs to the pump, and several items of cookware to replace things that were beyond salvaging. Tommy wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Is it morning already?" "It is." "Come sit down. There is oatmeal cooking." She fed him a proper breakfast, then set him to simple tasks while she continued working. By the time Garrett came in for his own breakfast, Martha had a plan formulated. "I need to make a trip into Jerome," she said, pouring him coffee. "There are supplies we require if I am going to make this kitchen functional. I have made a list." Garrett scanned the list, his eyebrows rising. "This is going to cost a fair amount. I am aware. But you hired me to organize this household. I cannot do that without proper supplies. However, if you prefer, I can work with what is here and do the best I can." He was quiet for a moment, drinking his coffee. "No, you are right. Get what you need. I will take you into town this afternoon. I can go alone if you have work here." "I am sure you could, but Jerome is rough, and I would rather accompany you." His tone left no room for argument. They made the trip to Jerome in the early afternoon, leaving Tommy with a neighboring rancher's wife, a kindly older woman named Ruth, who seemed delighted to watch the boy. The town was busy, miners coming and going, wagons loaded with copper ore heading to the smelters. Martha moved through the general store with efficiency, selecting items with care, balancing quality with cost. Garrett followed, carrying her selections, and she noticed he did not question her choices. At one point, she picked up a small tin of peppermints and added it to the pile. "For Tommy," she explained. "A treat for being helpful." Something softened in Garrett's expression. "You do not have to do that, I know. But he has been good help, and children respond well to acknowledgement." As they loaded the supplies into the wagon, a man approached. He was thick-set, with a face that suggested too much time in saloons and not enough honest work. "Garrett Nichols." "Heard you had brought a woman out to your place." Garrett's entire body tensed. "What I do on my property is my business, Dutch." Sure, just making conversation. Just seems odd, you know, a single woman living out there with you and the boy. People might talk." Martha stepped forward before Garrett could respond, her voice cool and professional. "I am employed as a household manager, and I assure you, everything is entirely proper. If you have concerns, you are welcome to speak to Reverend Thomas, who reviewed my references. Now, if you will excuse us, we have work to return to." She climbed up onto the wagon seat, leaving Dutch standing there looking somewhat foolish. Garrett followed, and they headed out of town in tense silence. "That man is a concern?" Martha finally asked. "Dutch Morrison owns some land adjacent to mine. He has been wanting to buy me out since before Mary died. He is not dangerous exactly, but he is persistent and unpleasant." "I see. Well, if people are going to gossip, there is little we can do to stop them." but I will not have my professional reputation questioned." Garrett glanced at her, and she thought she caught a hint of admiration in his expression. "You handled him well. I have dealt with worse than small-town busybodies." They collected Tommy on the way back, and the boy chattered happily about his afternoon with Ruth, who had apparently fed him cookies and let him play with her barn cats. As they approached the homestead, Martha felt an odd sensation, something almost like coming home, which was ridiculous given she had only been there one day. The following weeks fell into a rhythm. Martha rose early, prepared breakfast, and spent her mornings working through the house, one room at a time. She would set Tommy to helping with age-appropriate tasks, teaching him as she worked. In the afternoons, she often worked outside, tackling the garden that had gone to weeds, organizing the storage areas in the barn, creating systems for tools and tack. Garrett stayed out of her way for the most part, focused on the ranch work. He was up before dawn and often did not finish until after dark. The ranch was not enormous, but it required constant attention. Cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, water sources needed checking. He also did occasional work for other ranchers to bring in extra money, which meant even longer days. But Martha noticed things. She noticed that Garrett always made time to see Tommy in the morning before heading out. She noticed he came in every afternoon around 3 to check on them both, usually with some excuse about needing a tool or wanting water. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on the clean kitchen, the mended curtains, the swept floors. She noticed he had started washing up better before coming in for meals, and that his clothes, while still work-worn, were cleaner because she had taken over the laundry. She also noticed he was a good man. He was patient with Tommy, kind to the animals, and respectful to her. He never made her feel like a servant. Instead, he treated her more like a partner in managing the homestead. When she made suggestions about repairs or improvements, he listened and usually implemented them if they were feasible. One evening, about a month into her tenure, Martha was in the kitchen preparing supper when Garrett came in early. He looked troubled, and she noticed he was favoring his left arm. "What happened?" "Nothing serious. Horse threw a shoe, got spooked, and knocked me into a fence post." "Let me see." "It is fine. Mr. Nichols, let me see your arm." He sighed and sat down at the table, rolling up his sleeve. His forearm was already bruising, a dark purple bloom spreading across the tanned skin. Martha examined it carefully, probing gently. He winced but did not pull away. "It is not broken, but you need to ice it and rest it for a day or two." "I do not have a day or two to rest. There is too much work." Martha went to the spring house and chipped ice from the block they kept there, wrapped it in a clean cloth, and brought it back to him. "Hold this on it. And you do have time to rest because you are going to. One day of rest now versus weeks of being unable to work if you injure it worse. Which makes more sense?" Garrett held her gaze, and something passed between them, an understanding, a connection. "You are bossy, you know that." "I have been told. Now where is Tommy?" "Playing in the barn. I will get him." "No, you will sit there with that ice on your arm. I will get him." Martha found Tommy building an elaborate structure with hay bales in the barn. She watched him for a moment, noting how much he had changed in just a month. He was cleaner, obviously, but it was more than that. He seemed happier, more settled. She had established routines for him, bedtimes and mealtimes, small lessons in reading and arithmetic, chores that gave him a sense of responsibility. "Tommy, time to wash up for supper." He bounded over to her with his usual enthusiasm. "Miss Martha, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you going to stay forever?" The question caught her off guard. "I am here for 6 months. That was the agreement." His face fell. "But after that you will leave, and everything will go back to how it was before." Martha knelt down to his level, her hands on his shoulders. "Tommy, even after I leave, you will remember everything you have learned. You will know how to keep your space tidy, how to do your chores, and your father will continue taking good care of you." But it was so sad before. Pa was sad all the time. He is not as sad now. Out of the mouths of children. Martha felt the words hit her square in the chest. People heal from sadness, but it takes time. Your father is a strong man, and he loves you very much. That night, after Tommy was in bed, Martha sat at the kitchen table, working on mending by lamplight. Garrett had stayed inside after supper, which was unusual. He sat in the chair by the stove, his injured arm resting, watching her work. "You have a talent for this," he said finally. "For mending, for all of it. The organizing, the managing, the way you are with Tommy. You are good at seeing what needs to be done and doing it. It is what I was hired to do. It is more than that, though. You care, I can tell." Martha kept her eyes on her stitching. "I believe in doing a job well. Is that all this is to you, a job?" The question hung in the air between them. Martha carefully set down her mending and looked at him. In the lamplight, he looked younger, less burdened. The lines around his eyes had eased somewhat over the past month. "I do not let myself think of it as anything else," she said carefully. "That way lies complications." And if I said I wanted complications, her heart skipped, but she kept her voice steady. "I would say you are not thinking clearly. I would say you are grateful for the help and confusing that with something else. I would say you are lonely and I am here, and that is not the same as actually caring for someone." Garrett stood up and crossed to the table, looking down at her. "You think I do not know my own mind. I think you have been through a tremendous loss. I think your life has been chaotic and difficult, and I think I have brought some order and peace, and that feels good, but it is not the same as love." The word hung between them, too big, too soon. "And what do you know about love, Miss Vance?" Martha met his eyes. "Enough to know it should not be rushed into. Enough to know that in 4 months I will complete my contract and move on, and you will still be here with your life and your son. Whatever you think you feel right now, it is not worth risking the stability we have created." He was quiet for a long moment. "You are right, I apologize. That was inappropriate." "There is nothing to apologize for. We are both human, but we need to maintain boundaries for everyone's sake." Garrett nodded and retreated to his room, leaving Martha alone with her mending and her racing heart. She had lied, of course. It was not just a job to her anymore. Somewhere in the past month, this place had gotten under her skin. Tommy had worked his way into her heart. And Garrett, with his quiet strength and his vulnerability, his dedication to his son and his ranch, had started to matter to her in ways she could not afford. The next day, Martha threw herself into work with renewed determination. She cleaned the main bedroom, which Garrett had been reluctant to let her touch. She found remnants of Mary everywhere. Her clothes still in the wardrobe, her brush on the dresser with strands of dark hair still tangled in the bristles, her shoes lined up neatly by the bed. When Garrett came in for the midday meal, he found Martha in the doorway of his room, holding a wooden box. "I packed her things," Martha said softly. "Her clothes, her personal items. I did not know if you wanted to keep them or give them away, so I put them in this box." "But Garrett, you cannot move forward if you are living in a shrine." His face went pale, then red. "You had no right. You hired me to organize your home. Part of that is helping you let go of what you do not need. And you decided I do not need memories of my wife. I decided you do not need to torture yourself every day by sleeping in a room that looks exactly as it did when she was alive. The memories are in your heart, not in a brush or a pair of shoes." Garrett strode into the room and took the box from her hands. For a moment she thought he might throw it or her out of the house. But instead he sank down onto the bed, holding the box in his lap, and she saw his shoulders begin to shake. Martha stood frozen, unsure what to do. Then, acting on instinct rather than logic, she sat down beside him and placed her hand on his back. He turned into her, and she held him as he cried, really cried, probably for the first time since Mary died. "I could not save her," he choked out between sobs. "The fever came so fast and I could not save her. I tried everything, but she just got worse and worse, and then she was gone, and I did not know how to be without her. I still do not know." "You have been doing it," Martha said quietly. "Every day you get up and you work and you take care of your son. That is how you do it, one day at a time. But I miss her so much. I know, and you always will, but missing her does not mean you cannot also live." They sat there for a long time, and Martha felt the shift between them. This was no longer about organization or household management. This was about healing, about two broken people finding unexpected solace in each other. That night, Garrett knocked on her door after Tommy was asleep. She opened it cautiously, and he stood in the hallway, looking uncertain. "I owe you an apology for how I reacted earlier." "No, you do not. Your grief is your own, and I should not have presumed. You were right, though. I have been holding on to ghosts. Mary would not have wanted that. She would have wanted me to move forward, to take care of Tommy, to live. She must have been a remarkable woman. She was. She was kind and strong and patient with me when I was young and foolish. We met when we were both 18, married at 19. We had 7 years together before she passed. Not nearly enough time," he paused. "But I am starting to think maybe I could have more, not a replacement for what I had, something different, something new." Martha knew what he was saying, what he was asking without asking. "Garrett, I cannot." "Why not?" "Because I am your employee, because there is a power imbalance, because you are vulnerable right now, because I have no idea what happens at the end of my 6 months, because there are 1,000 reasons why this is complicated and difficult. And if I said those reasons do not matter to me, they should matter, for your sake and for Tommy's." "Tell me you do not feel it too," Garrett said, stepping closer. "Tell me you have not thought about what it might be like if you stayed, not as an employee, but as something more." Martha wanted to lie. Lying would be safer, would maintain the boundaries that needed to exist. But when she looked into his eyes, she could not do it. "What I feel is irrelevant. What matters is doing what is right and sensible. And if I want you to stay at the end of the 6 months, if I asked you to stay not as a household manager but as my wife, would that be right and sensible?" Her breath caught. "You are not proposing to me. Not yet. But I am telling you that I am thinking about it, that over the past month I have watched you bring order to chaos. Not just in my house, but in my life, in my heart. I have watched you with Tommy, seen the way you care for him even while maintaining you are just doing a job. I have seen you work until you are exhausted, never complaining, always finding ways to make things better. And I have felt something I did not think I would feel again. Garrett, please do not do this." "Why?" "Because it scares you. It scares me too. I did not think I could love again. Part of me feels guilty for even considering it, like I am betraying Mary. But then I think about what you said about her wanting me to live, and I think maybe this is what living looks like." Martha stood up, putting distance between them. "You need to think about this more carefully. You need time. We both do." "How much time?" "Another month, 2, 5. When will it be acceptable for me to acknowledge what I feel? I do not know, but not now, not yet." Garrett looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I will wait. But Martha, know this. What I feel is real. It is not gratitude or loneliness or confusion. It is real, and it is not going away." After he left, Martha sat on her bed, trembling. Everything in her life had trained her to be practical, to not indulge in fantasies or hopes that could lead to disappointment. But Garrett was offering her something she had never dared to want: a home, a family, a place to belong. The question was whether she was brave enough to accept it. The following weeks were strange, charged with unspoken feelings and careful politeness. Garrett kept his word and did not push, but Martha felt his attention on her constantly. She caught him watching her as she worked, his expression soft and wondering. She noticed he found more reasons to be near the house, helping with tasks he would have normally left to her. Tommy, oblivious to the undercurrents, continued his cheerful routine, growing and learning and thriving. Martha taught him his letters in the evenings, and Garrett would sit nearby, mending tack or doing paperwork, listening to the lessons with a smile on his face. One afternoon, a rider came to the homestead. He was young, probably around 20, with a badge pinned to his vest and a serious expression. Garrett met him in the yard, and Martha watched from the window as they talked. Garrett's posture grew tense, and when the rider left, he came inside looking troubled. "What is wrong?" Martha asked. "That was a deputy from Jerome. There have been cattle thefts in the area. Several ranches have lost stock, including Ruth's husband. They are warning everyone to be vigilant." "Is there danger?" "Could be. Cattle rustlers are not usually violent unless cornered, but it is still a concern. I am going to need to spend more time checking on the herd, making sure they are secure." "Should Tommy and I be worried?" "No. Stay close to the house, and if you see anyone you do not recognize, get inside and bar the door. But I do not think they will bother with the house. It is the livestock they are after." For the next several days, Garrett was gone more than usual, often staying out until well after dark, checking the farthest reaches of his property. Martha tried not to worry, but she found herself listening for his return each evening, only relaxing when she heard his horse in the yard. On the fourth night he did not come home. Martha stayed up long past when she would normally retire, listening, waiting. When midnight came and went with no sign of him, she began to genuinely worry. She could not leave Tommy alone to go searching, and she had no idea where on the vast ranch Garrett might be. At around 2 in the morning, she heard a horse approach. She grabbed the rifle Garrett had shown her how to use, went to the window, and saw him dismounting slowly, painfully. She set down the rifle and hurried outside. "Garrett, what happened?" "Found the rustlers. There was an altercation." Even in the moonlight she could see blood on his shirt. "I am all right, just a graze. Get inside, now." She helped him into the house, got him seated by the lamp, and carefully unbuttoned his shirt. He had a wound along his ribs, a long gash that was still bleeding sluggishly. It looked like a bullet had caught him, tearing skin but not penetrating deeply. "This needs cleaning and bandaging." "You are lucky it was not worse. They got away, but they will not be back. I made sure of that." Martha fetched water and clean cloth, her hands steady despite the fear coursing through her. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, and Garrett sat still, watching her face. "You were frightened for me," he said softly. "Of course I was. You could have been killed. Would you have cared so much if I was just your employer?" Martha pressed a clean cloth to the wound, applying pressure to stop the bleeding. "Do not do this now. When should I do it?" "I was out there tonight, and all I could think about was getting back here, getting back to you and Tommy, and I realized something. Life is short and uncertain. Mary taught me that. So why am I wasting time pretending I do not feel what I feel, because you could be wrong? Because in the morning, when you are not hurt and exhausted, you might realize you were caught up in the moment. I will not." She began wrapping bandages around his torso, forcing him to lift his arms. "You do not know that." "Yes, I do. Martha, look at me." She finished securing the bandage before meeting his eyes. What she saw there made her heart race. It was not gratitude or confusion. It was clear, certain desire and something deeper, something that looked very much like love. "I am not wrong about this," Garrett said. "And I do not think you are either. I think you are scared, and I understand why. But being scared is not a good enough reason to walk away from something that could be wonderful." "And what about Tommy? What if this does not work and I leave, and he loses someone else he cares about? What if it does work? What if you stay and he gains a mother who loves him and we become a real family?" "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is. Maybe we are the ones making it complicated." He reached up and took her hand. "Stay. Not because I hired you, not for 6 months or any set term. Stay because you want to be here. Stay because you care about us. Stay because you can see a future here." Martha felt tears prick at her eyes. "I am afraid." "So am I. But I am more afraid of letting you go and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." She sank down into the chair beside him, still holding his hand. "What would people say? You, taking up with your household manager barely 2 years after your wife died. Let them say what they want. Anyone who matters will see the truth, that you brought light back into a dark place. That you have given Tommy stability and kindness. That you have made me remember what it feels like to hope for something beyond just getting through each day. This is madness, probably, but it is the best kind of madness." He squeezed her hand gently. "I am not asking you to decide everything tonight, but promise me you will think about it, really think about it. Not about all the reasons it should not work, but about whether you want it to work." Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. They sat there in the lamplight, hands clasped, until the adrenaline wore off and Garrett began to sag with exhaustion. She helped him to his room, made sure he was settled, and then retreated to her own small space. But she did not sleep. She lay in the darkness, thinking about everything Garrett had said. She thought about Tommy's laughter, about the satisfaction she felt when she looked around the now orderly homestead. She thought about Garrett's steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he looked at her like she was something precious. She thought about the life she had been living before this position, moving from job to job, never settling, never letting herself care too deeply, because caring meant vulnerability and vulnerability meant pain. She had been safe but also profoundly alone. Here, she was not alone. Here, she had stumbled into something that felt like belonging. The question was whether she was brave enough to reach out and claim it. Morning came, and Martha rose early as always. She prepared breakfast quietly, aware of Garrett in his room, likely still sleeping after his late and eventful night. But when she heard Tommy stirring, she went to get him ready for the day. "Where is Pa?" Tommy asked, noticing his father's absence at breakfast. "He had a difficult night." "He was injured, but he is going to be fine. He is resting now." Tommy's eyes went wide with worry. "Injured how?" "There was some trouble with cattle rustlers, but your father handled it. He just needs to rest today." After Tommy ate, Martha left him with quiet activities and went to check on Garrett. She knocked softly and entered when he called out. He was awake, propped up on pillows, his torso wrapped in the bandages she had applied. He looked pale but alert. "How do you feel?" "Like I was shot, but I have felt worse." She brought him water and some bread, insisting he eat something. He complied, watching her with those steady hazel eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. "Did you think about what I said?" "I did not think about much else." "And?" Martha sat down on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding his injured side. "I think you have turned my entire world upside down. I think I came here expecting to do a job, earn my pay, and move on. And instead, I found something I did not know I was looking for, which is a place to belong. People to care about, a reason to stop running." She took a deep breath. "But I am still afraid." "Of what specifically? Of losing it? Of failing? of not being what you and Tommy need, of the inevitable comparisons to Mary, of 1,000 things that could go wrong. Garrett reached out and took her hand. I cannot promise nothing will go wrong. Life does not work that way, but I can promise I will face whatever comes alongside you. And as for Mary, I loved her. Part of me always will. But love is not finite. The heart does not run out of room. What I feel for you does not diminish what I felt for her. It is different, separate, its own thing. And Tommy adores you. He told me the other day that he hopes you never leave. He calls you Miss Martha, but I see the way he looks at you. He sees you as a mother already, even if he has not said the words. Martha felt tears slip down her cheeks. I do not want to hurt him. Then do not. Stay, be part of his life. Let him love you openly the way he already does in his heart. You make it sound so easy. It is not easy. Nothing worth having is, but it is simple. Do you care for us? Yes. Do you want to be here? Yes. Then stay. Everything else we will figure out as we go. Martha looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw hope there and vulnerability and determination. She saw a man who had been through tremendous pain and come out the other side still capable of love. She saw a future that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. All right, she whispered. I will stay. The smile that broke across Garrett's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He pulled her closer, careful of his injury, and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, Martha was crying in earnest, but they were good tears, happy tears. I have one condition, she said. Name it. We do this properly. Courting, marriage, the whole thing. I will not live here in some ambiguous arrangement. If I am staying, it is as your wife, with all the respect and commitment that entails. Done. Though technically I should probably ask you properly. Martha Vance, will you do me the honor of marrying me? Yes, you fool. Yes, I will. They told Tommy that evening. The boy's reaction was to shriek with joy and launch himself at Martha, hugging her so hard she nearly fell over. Then he peppered them with questions about when the wedding would be, and could he be part of it? And did this mean he could call her Ma? And would they have more children because he had always wanted a brother or sister? Garrett laughed, the sound rich and genuine in a way Martha had not heard before. Slow down, son. We will work out the details. But yes, Miss Martha is going to be part of our family for good. They decided to wait a few weeks before going into Jerome to make arrangements with the Reverend. Garrett needed to heal, and they both agreed that a hasty wedding would only fuel gossip. Besides, Martha wanted time to adjust to this new reality, to let herself believe it was real. During those weeks, the homestead continued its transformation. What had been a chaotic, grief-stricken place was now a home. Martha finished organizing every corner, but more than that, she made it warm. She put wildflowers in jars on the table. She baked bread that filled the house with mouth-watering smells. She sewed new curtains for the windows and mended the old ones. She created a space where people did not just survive but actually lived. Garrett healed quickly, his natural strength serving him well. As soon as he was able, he returned to work, but Martha noticed a change in him. He smiled more. He lingered over meals, talking about his day, asking about hers. He showed her parts of the ranch she had not yet seen, riding out with her in the evenings when the work was done, sharing his plans and dreams for the future. I want to expand the herd, he said one evening as they sat on a hill overlooking the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. If the cattle market stays strong, we could do well. Maybe even build a bigger house, one where we would not be tripping over each other. I like the house as it is. You do, even with its crazy additions and sagging roof, it has character. Besides, it is not the building that makes a home. Garrett looked at her, his expression tender. You are right about that. When they finally made the trip into Jerome to speak with Reverend Thomas, Martha was nervous. The Reverend was an older man, stern-faced but kind-eyed, and he listened carefully as Garrett explained the situation. "You understand people will talk," Reverend Thomas said. "A household employee marrying her employer, particularly so soon after your wife's passing. I do understand, but I also know what I feel, and I know Martha is the right person for me and for Tommy. If I have to deal with gossip, so be it." The Reverend turned to Martha. "And you, Miss Vance. You are certain this is what you want. You are not being coerced or feeling obligated because of your employment situation." "I am certain," Martha said firmly. "I know how it looks, but what Garrett and I have is real. I love him and I love his son, and I want to build a life with them." Reverend Thomas studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. I will perform the ceremony. When would you like to marry?" They settled on a date 3 weeks away, which would give Martha time to prepare. She had no family to invite, but Ruth and her husband would stand as witnesses, and a few other neighbors would attend. It would be a simple ceremony, nothing elaborate, but Martha did not care about that. What mattered was the commitment they were making. She used some of her saved wages to buy fabric and made herself a simple but pretty dress in a soft blue color. Ruth helped with the final fitting, chattering happily about how wonderful it was that Garrett had found love again. "That man was lost after Mary died," Ruth said, pins in her mouth as she adjusted the hem. "I worried about him constantly. But then you came along, and it was like watching someone wake up from a long sleep. You have been good for him, dear. Good for that whole family." The night before the wedding, Martha lay in her small room for the last time. Tomorrow, she would move into the main bedroom, would take her place as Garrett's wife, would officially become Tommy's mother. The reality of it was overwhelming. There was a soft knock on her door, and she opened it to find Tommy in his nightshirt, looking worried. "What is wrong, sweetheart?" "I am scared," he admitted in a small voice. "Of what? What if you change your mind? What if you decide you do not want to be my ma after all?" Martha knelt down and pulled him into a hug. "Tommy, I am not going to change my mind. I love you. I have loved you since the first day I met you, when you grabbed my hand and told me all about the chickens. Tomorrow, when I marry your father, I am choosing you too. You understand? But what if something happens? What if you get sick like my first ma did?" Ah, there it was, the real fear. Martha held him tighter. "I cannot promise nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way, but I can promise I am not going anywhere by choice. I am here and I am staying, and you are stuck with me." Tommy pulled back and looked at her with those serious eyes. "I am glad. I like being stuck with you. Good. Now back to bed. Tomorrow is a big day." The wedding took place on a bright Saturday morning in late October of 1882. The air was crisp and cool, the sky a brilliant blue. Martha wore her new dress and carried a small bouquet of wildflowers Tommy had picked for her. Garrett wore his best suit, clean and pressed, his hair neatly trimmed. Tommy stood beside them in new clothes, practically vibrating with excitement. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. Martha listened to the words, made her vows, and meant every syllable. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife and Garrett kissed her, she felt something settle deep in her soul. This was right. This was where she was meant to be. After the ceremony, Ruth hosted a small celebration at her home. There was food and music and neighbors offering congratulations. A few people looked skeptical, and Martha caught whispers here and there, but she did not care. Let them talk. She knew the truth of what she and Garrett had built. That night, they returned to the homestead as a married couple. Tommy went to bed without argument, clearly exhausted from the excitement. Martha stood in the main bedroom, their bedroom now, feeling suddenly shy. Garrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Having second thoughts. No, just adjusting. It is strange, is it not, that such a big change can happen in one day. The change has been happening for months. Today was just making it official. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face gently. I know I said this earlier, but I need you to understand. I love you, Martha. Not because you organized my house or because you are good with Tommy, though those things are wonderful. I love you because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your stubbornness, your intelligence. All of it. I love you too, she said, and saying the words out loud felt like freedom. I did not think I would. I did not think I could, but you proved me wrong. Their first weeks as a married couple were an adjustment. There were moments of awkwardness as they learned to share space as husband and wife rather than employer and employee. But there were also moments of joy, of laughter, of quiet contentment. Martha discovered that married life suited her. She liked waking up beside Garrett, liked the casual intimacy of their daily interactions, liked the way Tommy now called her Ma without hesitation. She liked being part of something larger than herself, a family unit working together toward common goals. The homestead continued to thrive under their combined efforts. Garrett focused on building up the ranch, and by spring, he had increased the herd significantly. The cattle market was strong, and they were able to make real profits for the first time in years. Martha managed the household with her usual efficiency, but she also expanded the garden, started keeping better chickens for eggs to sell in town, and even began a small orchard planting fruit trees that would bear in future years. Tommy grew like a weed, shooting up several inches over that first year. Martha continued teaching him, and he proved to be a bright student, eager to learn. She noticed that the sadness that had shadowed him when she first arrived was completely gone now. He was a happy, secure child, confident in being loved. One evening the following summer, Martha was washing dishes after supper when Garrett came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. It was a familiar gesture now, one that made her smile. I have been thinking, he said. That is usually dangerous. He laughed and kissed her neck. I have been thinking about how much has changed in the past year, how different life is now compared to when you first arrived. Different good or different bad, different wonderful. Martha, you transformed everything. Not just the house, though that is certainly different, but the whole feeling of this place. It feels like a home now. It feels like there is purpose and joy here. We did that together. Maybe, but you were the catalyst. You came into our lives and organized the chaos. Not just the physical chaos, but the emotional chaos too. You gave me a reason to hope again, to believe there could be happiness after loss. Martha turned in his arms, soap suds still on her hands. Are you going to get sentimental on me, Garrett Nichols? Maybe I am. Is that a problem? Not at all, I rather like it. She kissed him softly. For what it is worth, you did the same for me. Before I came here, I was just drifting, moving from job to job, never letting myself want anything more. You taught me it is okay to want things, to want a home and a family and a future. Then we are even. Later that night, after Tommy was asleep, they sat outside on the porch enjoying the cool evening air. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the sounds of the night creatures filled the air. Martha leaned against Garrett's shoulder, feeling more content than she had ever imagined possible. I have some news, she said quietly. What kind of news? The good kind. I am fairly certain I am with child. Garrett went very still, then turned to look at her. Truly, I believe so. It is early yet, but the signs are there. He let out a whoop of joy that probably woke every animal within a mile and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around. Martha, that is wonderful. Are you sure? Should you be taking it easy? Do we need to get the doctor?" She laughed at his sudden anxiousness. "I am fine. Women have babies all the time, but yes, I am fairly certain. Tommy is going to be so excited. He has been asking about brothers and sisters since the day we told him we were getting married. Then he will be happy to know his wish is coming true." They told Tommy the next morning, and his reaction was everything they had hoped. He danced around the kitchen, asking 100 questions, and immediately began planning all the things he would teach his new sibling. Martha watched him with a full heart, thinking about how far they had all come. The pregnancy progressed well. Martha continued her work around the homestead, though Garrett fussed at her constantly about overdoing it. By fall, she was obviously showing and the baby was active, kicking strongly. Ruth came to stay with them as Martha's time approached, and on a cold January morning in 1884, Martha gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, but when it was over and she held the squalling infant in her arms, with Garrett beside her looking awestruck and Tommy peering over the edge of the bed with wide eyes, she felt complete. They named him James, after Martha's father, and he was a healthy, hungry baby who kept them all busy. Tommy took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help, to hold the baby, to show him things. Garrett was a devoted father, taking night shifts when the baby cried, changing diapers without complaint, and looking at his new son with obvious wonder. The homestead adapted to the new addition. Martha learned to manage household tasks with a baby on her hip. Garrett hired a part-time hand to help with the ranch work, freeing him up to spend more time with the family. Life was busy and sometimes chaotic, but it was a good chaos, a living chaos, so different from the dead emptiness that had existed before. As James grew from infant to toddler, the homestead continued to prosper. The cattle operation expanded, and Garrett began breeding horses as well, developing a reputation for quality stock. Martha's egg and garden produce business grew, and she started preserving and selling jams and pickles in town, bringing in additional income. They paid off debts, made improvements, and slowly built a life of genuine stability. Tommy turned 10 and showed a natural aptitude for working with animals. He spent hours helping Garrett with the horses and cattle, learning the skills he would need to eventually take over the ranch. But Martha also made sure he continued his education, teaching him mathematics, reading, history, and geography at the kitchen table each evening. When James was 2, Martha discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she delivered a daughter whom they named Elizabeth, with an easier labor than her first. Elizabeth had Martha's blonde hair and Garrett's hazel eyes, and from the moment she arrived, she wrapped everyone around her tiny finger. By the summer of 1886, the homestead was unrecognizable from what it had been when Martha first arrived 4 years earlier. The house had been properly repaired, the roof no longer sagging, the additions integrated more coherently. The barn was well maintained, the fences were strong, and the property had an air of prosperous tidiness. The garden flourished, the orchard was beginning to produce, and the cattle and horses were healthy and numerous. One evening, Garrett and Martha sat on the porch swing he had built for her, watching the sun set over the valley. Tommy was in the barn, tending to a mare that was due to foal soon. James and Elizabeth were inside, supposedly sleeping, though they could hear occasional giggles through the open window. "You remember the day you arrived?" Garrett asked, his arm around Martha's shoulders. "How could I forget? I thought I had made a terrible mistake accepting this position. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made." She looked up at him. "Do you ever think about what your life would be like if I had not come?" "I try not to. I suspect I would have eventually lost the ranch. Probably would have had to send Tommy to live with relatives while I tried to earn enough to survive. It would have been a slow collapse. He pulled her closer. You saved us, Martha. You came here to organize a chaotic homestead, and you ended up organizing my entire life. My soul, even. You put the broken pieces back together. We put them back together. I just helped with the sorting and arrangement. He laughed and kissed her temple. However you want to describe it, I am grateful. Every single day, I wake up grateful that you responded to that advertisement. Grateful that you stayed when you easily could have left. Grateful that you took a chance on a broken man and his lost little boy. You were never broken, just bent. And Tommy was never lost. He just needed some stability and love, which you provided in abundance. Martha was quiet for a moment, listening to the evening sounds, feeling the solid warmth of her husband beside her, knowing her children were safe and happy inside. I never imagined I could have this, she said softly. A real home, a family, purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me all of that. Then I suppose we gave each other what we needed. I suppose we did. They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the first stars appeared. Inside, the giggles finally quieted as the children settled into sleep. In the barn, Tommy worked with quiet competence, preparing for the birth that would come soon. Around them, the homestead breathed with life and purpose and love. Martha thought about the frightened, desperate woman who had arrived on this property 4 years ago, clutching her carpetbags and trying not to show her fear. She thought about the grieving, overwhelmed man who had hired her, and the sad, lonely little boy who had grabbed her hand that first day. She thought about how they had all been lost in their own ways, all struggling to find their footing in a world that had knocked them down. And she thought about how they had found each other and built something beautiful from the wreckage. The years continued to pass, bringing their share of challenges and triumphs. There was a drought one year that tested their resources and ingenuity. There was an outbreak of disease that affected some of the cattle. There was the time James fell from the barn loft and broke his arm, sending everyone into a panic until the doctor said it and assured them he would be fine. There was the winter storm that damaged part of the house and required extensive repairs. But there were also weddings to attend as neighbors married off children. There were barn dances and community gatherings. There were holidays celebrated with joy and tradition. There were quiet evenings of contentment and loud, chaotic mornings of family life. There were accomplishments. Tommy's first successful horse sale, Martha winning a blue ribbon for her preserves at the county fair, James learning to read, Elizabeth taking her first steps. By 1890, 8 years after Martha's arrival, the Nichols family was a fixture in the community. The whispers and gossip that had followed their marriage had long since faded, replaced by respect for what they had built. Garrett served on the town council, helping make decisions about the community's future. Martha organized fundraisers for the new school building and helped coordinate social events. Their children were well known and well liked, and the homestead was pointed to as an example of what hard work and dedication could achieve. Tommy was 14 now, tall and strong, already showing signs of the man he would become. He had his father's work ethic and his mother's organizational mind, a combination that served him well. He talked about his future, about expanding the ranch further, about new breeding techniques for the horses, about building his own life while staying connected to the land he loved. James was 6, curious and adventurous, always asking questions and exploring everything. He adored his older brother and followed him around whenever allowed, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. He had a way with animals that suggested he would be a natural rancher like his father and brother. Elizabeth was 4, sweet, and stubborn in equal measure. She had everyone wrapped around her finger and knew it. But she also showed signs of her mother's practical nature, organizing her toys with precision and scolding her brothers when they made messes. She was the baby of the family and likely to remain so, as Martha and Garrett had decided their family was complete. One evening in late spring, Martha stood in the kitchen of the homestead, preparing supper. The room was bright and clean, well organized and efficiently arranged. It bore little resemblance to the chaotic disaster it had been 8 years earlier. She paused in her work, looking around, remembering. Garrett came in from outside, dusty and tired from a long day. He washed up at the sink, then came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist in the familiar gesture that still made her heart skip. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, resting his chin on her shoulder. "About the first time I walked into this kitchen. About how overwhelming it all seemed. And now it is just home." She turned in his arms and looked up at him. "Do you know what occurred to me today?" "What is that?" "I have now lived here longer than I lived anywhere else. This is the place I have stayed the longest, put down the deepest roots. This is truly home in a way nowhere else ever was." Garrett's expression softened. "I am glad. That is how it should be. I used to think home was a place, a building, a location. But it is not, is it? Home is the people. It is you and Tommy and James and Elizabeth. It is this life we have built together. The structure is just where we keep it all." "That is very philosophical for a Tuesday evening." She laughed and swatted his arm. "I am being serious. I know, and you are right." He kissed her forehead. "You are always right. It is rather annoying, actually. Someone has to be." They heard the thunder of small feet and James burst into the kitchen. "Ma, Pa, Tommy says the mare is about to foal. Can we go watch, please?" Martha looked at Garrett, who shrugged. "Supper can wait a bit." "Let us go see." They gathered Elizabeth and walked out to the barn as a family, arriving just as the mare began the final stages of labor. Tommy was there, calm and competent, having assisted with births many times now. He talked them through what was happening, explaining to his younger siblings, and within an hour, a new foal was standing on wobbly legs beside its mother. Elizabeth clapped her hands in delight. James peppered Tommy with questions. Garrett supervised, offering guidance when needed but mostly letting Tommy handle it. And Martha stood back, watching her family, feeling a wave of profound gratitude wash over her. This life, this beautiful, complicated, imperfect life was hers. She had found it in the last place she expected, had stumbled into it while simply trying to survive. And it had given her everything she had never dared to hope for. As they walked back to the house, Elizabeth on Garrett's shoulders and James holding Martha's hand, chattering about the new foal, Tommy walking ahead with the confidence of young adulthood, Martha felt complete. The chaos of those early days was a distant memory, replaced by a different kind of chaos, the controlled chaos of a busy, happy family. That night, after the children were finally settled and the house was quiet, Martha and Garrett sat on their porch swing, the same one where they had sat so many evenings over the years. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was soft with the promise of summer. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if things had gone differently?" Martha asked. "If Mary had not died, if you had never needed to hire someone to help organize the homestead?" Garrett was quiet for a moment. "I used to in the early days after you arrived. I felt guilty for even thinking about moving forward, about caring for someone else. But Martha, I have come to believe that life is not about the paths we did not take. It is about making the most of the path we are on. Mary was part of my journey, an important part, and I will always carry that with me. But you are my present and my future, you and our children and this life we have built, and I would not change that for anything. Even with all the challenges, the hard times, especially with those. The hard times taught us we could survive anything as long as we faced it together. They made the good times sweeter. Martha leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I love you, Garrett Nichols. I loved you before I was ready to admit it, and I love you more with each passing year. And I love you, Martha Nichols. You came into my life when I was drowning and you threw me a rope. More than that, you taught me how to swim again. You organized my chaotic home, and in the process, you organized my chaotic soul. You gave me back my life. We gave each other our lives. Yes, we did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars, listening to the night, feeling the peace of home and family and love surround them. The homestead, once a symbol of grief and chaos, was now a testament to resilience and hope. The house, once cluttered and sad, was now filled with laughter and life. The man, once lost and broken, was now whole and content. The woman, once adrift and alone, was now anchored and beloved. And in the barn, a new foal slept beside its mother, a symbol of new beginnings, of life continuing, of the endless cycle of growth and change and hope that defined their existence. The story of Martha and Garrett was, in many ways, a simple one. A woman answered an advertisement. A man hired her to bring order to chaos. They fell in love. They built a life together. But in the details, in the daily living of it, in the struggles overcome and the joys celebrated, it became something extraordinary. It became a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to create beauty from brokenness. As the years continued to unfold, as their children grew and eventually had children of their own, as the homestead passed from one generation to the next, the foundation Martha and Garrett built remained strong. The lesson they taught through their example was that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made every day in big ways and small. It is the choice to show up, to do the work, to stay when things are hard, to celebrate when things are good, and to always, always choose each other. The Nichols family prospered not because life was easy, but because they faced it together, with love as their compass and home as their anchor. And it all began with a woman who came to organize a chaotic homestead, and ended up organizing so much more, bringing order not just to physical spaces, but to broken hearts and wounded souls. In 1895, 13 years after Martha first arrived at the homestead, Tommy married a young woman named Sarah from a neighboring ranch. The wedding was held at the homestead, with the entire community in attendance. Martha and Garrett watched their eldest son take his vows, and Martha found herself crying happy tears. After the ceremony, as the celebration continued, Martha stood with Ruth, now elderly but still sharp as ever. "You did well with that boy," Ruth said. "He has grown into a fine man. Garrett did most of the hard work. I just provided some structure and love. Do not sell yourself short, dear. You transformed that family. I remember what they were like before you came. Lost souls, all of them, and look at them now." She gestured to where Garrett was laughing with a group of friends, James and Elizabeth dancing nearby, Tommy and his new bride gazing at each other with obvious devotion. "You created this happiness, this stability, this family. That is no small thing." Martha watched her family, her heart full. "I suppose I did, though it created me just as much. We made each other. That is what the best families do." As the sun set on that spring day, as the celebration continued into the evening, Martha reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 13 years ago, she had been desperate, alone and afraid, stepping off a stagecoach into an uncertain future. She had come to this place expecting only employment, a temporary position to provide a paycheck and a roof over her head. Instead, she had found her life's purpose. She had found love in its truest form, not the romantic fantasy of novels, but the real, gritty, beautiful work of building something together. She had found family, not through blood but through choice and commitment and daily acts of care. She had found home, not as a place but as a feeling, a sense of belonging that permeated every aspect of her existence. The homestead had indeed been chaotic when she arrived, cluttered and disorganized and heavy with grief. But the physical chaos had been merely a symptom of the deeper disorder, the emotional and spiritual disarray that comes from loss and loneliness and despair. Martha had organized it all, bringing her skills and determination to bear, but she had done more than just clean and arrange. She had brought hope, she had brought light, she had brought love, and in return, Garrett and Tommy had given her the same. They had taken a woman adrift and given her an anchor. They had taken someone going through the motions of survival and given her reasons to truly live. They had shown her that it was safe to open her heart, to take risks, to hope for more than she had dared to dream. Together, they had created something that would outlast them all, a legacy of love and family and commitment that would ripple forward through generations. The homestead would remain in the family, passed from parent to child, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. And at the heart of it all would be the tale of how it began. With a desperate advertisement, a woman brave enough to respond, and two people wise enough to recognize love when it appeared in the unlikeliest of circumstances. As darkness fell and lanterns were lit, as music played and people danced, Garrett found Martha and pulled her into his arms. "Dance with me, wife, in front of everyone, especially in front of everyone. I want the whole world to see how much I love you." She let him lead her into the dance, laughing as he spun her around. Around them, their family and friends celebrated, but Martha was only aware of Garrett, of the strength in his arms, the love in his eyes, the solid reality of the life they had built. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever imagined possible. Good, because I intend to keep you that way for the next 50 years. Only 50, fine, 60, 70, however long we have, deal." They danced under the stars, on land they had nurtured together, surrounded by people they loved, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. They had found each other at precisely the right moment, when both needed saving, when both were ready to do the hard work of healing and growing and loving. The chaotic homestead was chaotic no more. In its place stood a thriving ranch, a warm home, a testament to what was possible when broken people chose to help each other heal. Martha had organized the physical space, yes, but she had done so much more. She had organized a family, a future, a legacy. And Garrett had been right, all those years ago when he first acknowledged his feelings. She had organized his soul too, bringing order to the chaos of grief, creating space for joy to return, teaching him that love could be found again even after devastating loss. As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, as Tommy and Sarah rode off to their new home on a section of the ranch Garrett had deeded to them, as James and Elizabeth were finally corralled and put to bed, Martha and Garrett found themselves alone on their porch swing once more. "A good day," Garrett said, "the best day. One of many. Here is to many more." They sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, watching the last lanterns flicker out across the property. The homestead was quiet now, peaceful, all the chaos of the day settled into contented rest. This was their life, Martha thought. This beautiful, ordinary, extraordinary life. It had not been easy. There had been struggles and sorrows along with the joys, but it had been worth every moment, every challenge, every tear, and every triumph, She had come to organize a chaotic homestead. She had stayed because she organized a grieving man's soul, and he had organized hers in return. Together, they had created order from chaos, hope from despair, love from loneliness. Together, they had built a home. And that, Martha reflected as she leaned against her husband's shoulder, watching the stars wheel overhead, was the greatest achievement of all. Not the organized cabinets or the swept floors or the tidy accounts. Not the successful ranch or the thriving children or the respect of the community. The greatest achievement was the love they shared, the family they had created, the home they had built brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. That was what would endure long after they were gone. That was what made all the hard work worthwhile. As sleep began to claim her there on the porch swing, safe in Garrett's arms, Martha felt a profound sense of gratitude and peace. She had found her place in the world, her purpose, her home. She had found love in the wild west of Arizona territory, in a chaotic homestead that needed her skills and heart. And she had given that homestead and the people in it everything she had to give. In return, they had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything,